Okay, great. Let's get started rather than delaying any further. This is Passion Coach Robin, and it's the fourth day of my live class for 5 keys to ignite as a force for good in your life. Um, Thanks for joining us, everyone. I appreciate that. And I'd like to also cover today, in addition to that, how we can utilize silence to achieve our personal purpose, our happiness, and our inner authenticity. And what does that mean, inner authenticity? For me, it means the ability for us to know the genuine part of ourselves, who we are, and to be able to express that openly with others, and that others who are in our orbit, so to speak, immediately recognize that because of the energy that we exude, because of how we interact with them. That's inner authenticity. It's a connection between the way that you express and the way that you feel and the core of who you are. I'll also today be taking another look at science because I'm a bit of a science geek and how it can change how you perceive visualization and silence in meditation. So, okay, thank you for letting me know where you're from. It's great, Georgia, Blue Ridge. I understand that's a beautiful area of the United States. I've never been there, but I've always wanted to visit. Would love to see some photographs there. Also, were any of you able to watch the pre-recorded video that I posted last week, talking a little bit about string theory? I know there's a few people in the audience that I've talked to about this, but I want to keep it simple, even though I tend to geek out a little bit. Um, so I'm going to be keeping that simple. But as I mentioned just a minute or two ago, as we jump into this, I really want to share a story about the Buddha that for me kind of ties in with Earth Day. So we'll see what you think. So the Buddha had his primary student, his when I say primary, his top student, so to speak, his follower, in a private session with him, and he gave that follower, that student, a private sermon that involved a flower. Have any of you heard of the flower sermon by the Buddha? If so, pop a one in the comments. So the gist of his sermon was simply that he held out a flower in total silence and just held it there while the student gazed upon that flower. And ultimately, after a few moments, the student smiled. And Buddha knew at that point that his student was worthy. He understood the connection between the outside world, the inside world, and silence. So, what I want to do today is I want to try this ourselves, especially in honor of Earth Day. And it is better later today if you can take a moment to go outside and to do this exercise with something that's actually in nature. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to do something here that's a little bit awkward simply because Facebook and screen sharing is kind of difficult. So I'm going to simplify it, I hope, by giving you the link in the comments. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you a link in the comments, and what I want you to do is click on that link and open it up. It should open up in a new tab in your browser. Look at the link that I send you and gaze at it. And we're going to spend 3 minutes so that it's not too long, but long enough to see what kind of feedback you can give when you come back in here. So what we're going to do, just to kind of, before you click on the link, we're going to breathe deeply 3 times, each time pulling the breath up from our diaphragm, deep through our torso, up through our heart area, and you can leave it here in your heart if you'd like. Or you can pull it up further, whatever feels right for you. But I want you to take the breath and just do that 3 times, which helps us to relax into the moment. And then you're going to just observe the image as if you're diving into it yourself and becoming it. Don't try to figure out what it is. It's not necessarily obvious. And just notice it. Just soften your eyes as you relax. Soften and softly look at it. Okay, you can go ahead and click the link. If your browser supports my voice, even though you've clicked out of this particular tab, I'm going to just say a few little things. Don't worry if you miss it. Just come back in a couple of minutes and let me know when you're back. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've each opened the link. Take a moment to get there and relax and breathe. Breathe in, hold it. You can close your eyes while you're relaxing if you'd like, and release your breath. Now we're going to breathe in again. Again, this is simply to help you relax. And release it. Now you can open your eyes and gaze at this object with soft eyes. You may notice the translucence. Does it seem to reach up to you? Could it even seem to come out of the computer off the page and reach into you? You feel its essence, its life, its breath. You connect with the delicacy and peace among its colors, its subtle, soft image. Take a few more moments and simply gaze. Excuse me. Okay, so slowly come forward from your gaze and take some more deep breaths. No need to hurry. Take your time. I'm curious, did anything in particular happen for you? Any particular feelings? Can you share any thoughts that you may have, or was it just a complete blank? That's okay if it was. I'm just curious. So let me know in the comments what may have come up for you, if anything, or if you just felt a sense of whatever. Tell me what that is. What I'd like to suggest is that this is much more effective exercise if you actually go outside in nature and you pick a flower, any living object that's settled quietly. And in fact, you could even do it with a crystal or a rock for that matter. But do it with a living object if you can, and settle in so that you can gaze at it quietly without interruption for just a few moments. And breathe deeply. And as you look at that object, relax into it and see if you can connect a little bit with it. See if it can connect with you. I think it's going to be easier for everyone to do it in the truth of nature, not the artificial screen that we're looking at now. So what I want to, and when you do that, by the way, please come back to the tribe and post about it. Maybe take a picture of what it was that you looked at, what you gazed at, and then come back and post what your experience was, if any, if anything. Maybe it just really was kind of a blank. Um, but take some time and try it and see what happens, and then post about it, please. And for those that post about it, I will have a special gift waiting for you. So I look forward to seeing your posts. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the science of vibration. When you connect, whether it's with a flower or whether it's with a person, and often it's unconscious to us, there's a vibrational exchange between us. And that's what we're learning to sensitize ourselves to. Everything in the universe is in constant motion and vibrations. And we know that from the study of molecules and electrons when we were kids in school. Everything vibrates, and it vibrates at a specific frequency. And as you sensitize yourself to these frequencies, you will find that you connect with them, that you can actually feel the vibration. You can connect with that exchange of electrons and neutrons and neutrinos and whatever you want to call them, that you just pick up and you start feeling that vibration within you. So it's something that you acquire and that you work at. It isn't necessarily something that just comes easily. I believe personally that children, infants, are born with this ability. And I'm going to point something out, and it ties into what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But I believe that children can see this energy. Have you ever noticed, especially with an infant, who, they're at their point of innocence, they just emerged from a womb where I'm guessing it was pretty dark for 9 months, meaning not much light, and unless it came from inside. But when they're born into the world and when they start opening their eyes after a month or so, and they start recognizing the world around them, have you ever noticed the sense of wonder? And I don't think it's just because they're beginning to notice things. I think they're they see colors. And specifically as they get older, even sometimes even with small toddlers, they can sit and they can stare at a person, and they'll stare and they'll stare and then they'll start smiling. And that person doesn't even have to smile first. Sometimes the child is the one who smiles first. Now, I personally am convinced that children are born able to see auras, in other words, colors. In other words, the frequency, the resonance that you put off from your body. And that's what makes them smile. So, why do I think that? That's why I get into this science stuff, because some people look at that and they go, oh, that's a bunch of woo woo. But I'm going to bring up Michio Kaku, who I've talked about in the past. He's a renowned Nobel laureate physicist and mathematician who has worked on string theory since 1968. And more recently, I think it was in 2022, maybe 23, recently, he published a book called The God Equation. Now, isn't that interesting? A physicist writing a book about God. Well, the God equation. So, in it, he explains that if we actually had a powerful enough microscope, we could see all these electrons, quarks, neutrinos, etc., that are constantly circling around us. And then that ultimately, these minuscule, minuscule particles really are nothing but vibrations on minuscule loops similar to rubber bands. And that's where, um, well, I jumping ahead, so let me stick with the rubber bands. And plucking those rubber bands, these minuscule loops, if you pluck them enough times and in different ways, it creates even smaller subatomic particles that dance around naturally, and because they're vibrating like crazy, they dance around and spontaneously. They've actually observed this. This is what's amazing. They have observed this. Sometimes these particles completely disappear, and then in a few moments, they pop back out. So they've gone somewhere and they've returned. Now, whether the frequency is jumping higher to a level that we simply don't have the microscopes to observe, we don't know. We don't know exactly what's going on. Anyway, what's truly amazing to me, and I covered this a little bit in a prior video that before we started this live series, is that when you go back in history to Aristotle and the philosopher Democritus, he actually theorized that everything on Earth, everything in life, could be reduced to tiny, indestructible particles. This is thousands of years ago. How did he know? Because now, come forward, we know that's true. We know the existence of atoms and electrons and molecules, etc. Also, around that time, Pythagoras, who was a mathematician, an ancient mathematician, he applied math to music and frequencies. And I've used this uh, metaphor a number of times through these teachings of the violin, that when a violin is played in one room, that note is actually picked up by a piano in another room, and it can sound like the note is coming from the piano. That's the law of resonance, and specifically sympathetic resonance. So now we're going to come back forward again, back to string theory, about where string theorizes, of course, it's a theory, mathematically. Okay, these unfortunately, string theory is not proven because the mathematical equations can be solved in a number of different ways. They come up with different solutions. So there may not be. And this is why they start talking about multiverses. But again, I'm jumping forward. The mathematics of string theory actually go all the way back to Galileo and Newton. And it isn't it interesting that Galileo and Newton and others like them were actually persecuted by the church because they were proposing sciences that took them beyond the idea of God as the church particularly taught it. So all of the work done thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, actually laid the foundation for modern physics today, together with astronomy, of course, with Galileo. But again, that's all vibration. So back to the neutrinos and subatomic particles that we can't observe. Is it possible, and this is part of string theory that's been criticized, is it possible there really is a multiverse? In other words, a number of different universes, and maybe these different universes exist in different frequencies. And therefore, that's why this anomaly of a particle disappearing and suddenly reappearing, perhaps changing its frequency, entering into another form of the universe. Who knows? It's all theoretical at this point. But the real point I'm trying to make here is not, not that you have to be a science geek like I am, but in other words, infinite potential is all around us, all around us. So, what does that have to do with gazing at a flower? The flower sermon is actually an example of entering into that silence, gaining a deeper connection with that universal, infinite potential, and that continuing dance between subatomic particles, levels of energy, and the possibility of disappearing for just a moment, for just a moment while you connect with the energy of that other item, that other object, that other life form. Also, as you experience deeper levels of meditation, which takes a lot of practice, it isn't something that happens overnight. Could it be you can connect with various vibrations? I particularly, now I'm empathic, what's called empathic, which means that I'm particularly sensitive to vibrations, and not everybody is. But when I meditate, I feel an inner vibration and it expands the deeper I go. And actually, when in a very deep silence, I'm going to call it rather than meditation, when in a deep silence, at the gamma level of brain waves, which we're going to jump into soon, we actually there's a dancing of colors, and it could be, who knows, but again, we're entering into these multiverse, this experience of vibration and energy. So I'm getting a little bit too esoteric, so I apologize, and I'm gonna pull it back to right now, that there's a just walk away with the idea that there's a universality of all form. It doesn't matter if it's animate, inanimate, if it all resides in a certain energy form. And science actually has already accepted this because everything in our planet and as we know it in our universe is made of molecules, which are simply forms of energy, atoms that have come together with electrons and nucleuses that are all vibrating at various energies. So what I'm suggesting, that even though we can leave science entirely and we can go back again to Henry David Thoreau, who experimented with this concept in a completely different form called transcendental thought. during his 2 year, 2 month, and evidently 2 day. I don't know why it was 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, but that's what I understand. While he lived on Walden Pond. And if you haven't read On Walden Pond, it actually is not an easy read because primarily because the language back then and our language today is quite a bit different. It's like reading Shakespeare, but it is beautiful, just like Shakespeare. It is beautiful again if you can transcend and just relax and not worry about the words themselves, but connect. So he explores other ideas in transcendental thought having to do with positive thinking and the law of attraction. And if you go back to a prior video that I recorded that is featured, you'll be able to actually listen. I think it's only like a 10-minute video, but you'll be able to listen to Thoreau's own words as to what he walked forward with from that experience on Walden Pond. So I'm not going to take time right now to read that to you. I really want to encourage you to go back and listen to that video. So let's move from here, since we're talking about frequencies, into the frequency of color. Our rainbows, also a topic introduced in prior videos. There's a hierarchy of color that corresponds to our emotions. And we know that through brain scans. Emotions can be tracked as movement, like clouds of colors in our brain, according to different frequencies. And what do those frequencies relate to? They relate to emotions. That's what's amazing. Our emotions are creating a frequency that can be translated so that we see it. And even though we cannot see the full spectrum of light, the rainbow that we do see is connected to the feelings, the emotions that we express or that we feel. So I'm going to share another link with you. And again, you may end up leaving the page. If you do, well, you will leave the page. I'm going to put this link in there, but I encourage you not to go to it. It's just going to be for you to refer to later because I want to explain these colors to you. The colors of the rainbow are presented here in a triangle, and they're associated with different emotions at different frequencies. So going down to the tip of that triangle at the bottom is shame. And shame is at a motion of, uh, or I'm sorry, is at I was distracted by a comment. I Shame is at the frequency of 20. Okay, it's a low frequency color. Then we have guilt and apathy and grief. Fear is at 100, and then desire. This is kind of interesting to me. These desire and anger are next, and they are more passionate, but they're still kind of gut feelings. And pride is along there. But then we move up to courage, which is at 200, and into acceptance, which is at 350. And reason is at 400, a frequency of 400. And love is at 500. Joy is at 540. Peace is at 600. That's why we talk about the ultimate goal of meditation really is to connect with that sense of peace. And enlightenment, which is what the masters achieve, is 700 plus. And if you look at these colors, I'm going to go back to the bottom and move up. They also correspond to the chakra system in our bodies. The lower frequencies are red. That's our root. Now, what are chakras? Um, I'm going to back up just a minute. Chakras are known in yogic teachings, and one of the first, well, the first recorded record of them is back in Sanskrit texts in Hindu philosophy called the Vedas. And they were actually written, we believe, and modified and added to between 1500 and 500 BC. And it's believed that by current scholars that these teachings actually go back a lot further, not just the chakra system. We're talking about the Vedas in general, that they go back a lot further before writing was even used. They were passed orally. They are believed to have been passed orally by the what are called Aryan people. Well, you may have heard of Aryans, but it's not in the same context. The Aryans were people who actually developed Sanskrit ultimately. They occupied the northern region of the Indian subcontinent, and they were part of the cradle of civilization and ultimately the Persian Empire, which gave us poets that include Rumi and other philosophy that is very beautiful and high. So, interestingly, for every single chakra in our body, and I'm going to go through them in a minute, there's an associated gland as well that's crucial to the healthy functioning of our bodies. Now, I ask myself again, did the ancients know about glands? Well, maybe they didn't know about the actual organs themselves, but they recognized the differences between the areas of our body and how they affected us. So let's take a quick look at the centers. Again, starting at our down at below our torso, between our legs, is the root chakra, which is associated with the adrenal glands, and those are responsible for sex hormones. This root chakra has the energy of the color red and associates with vitality and power. Now, moving up the body to the area of the ovaries and but below the torso, and in the men, it's the gonads. They regulate our immune system and they regulate our metabolism. For women, as I mentioned, ovaries. For men, it's testicles. Its color, the color of that chakra is actually orange, and it's associated naturally with creativity. We create another being in our image through that center of creativity. Our solar plexus, moving up, is yellow, and it's in the torso area, and it's associated with the pancreas, which regulates metabolism and controls blood sugar, and it's associated, this I love, it's yellow, mind you, it's associated with sunshine and success. Success. So when you say you have a feeling in your gut, follow it because it's leading you to success. This is why. The heart chakra is actually associated with the thymus, which regulates the immune system, along with emotions, of course, of love, trust, forgiveness, and openness. And if you notice, it's much higher on that scale of color, okay, and emotion. It's among the top. I think it's 500 if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have the image in front of me. So, love, trust, forgiveness, which we talked about yesterday, and openness are in this heart chakra, which happens to be green. And so, being green, why? It's associated with nature, with equilibrium, life, and growth. So, think about that. It's green. Emotions of love, trust, forgiveness, and openness associated with nature. It's our nature, with equilibrium, balance, life, and growth. The throat chakra has the parathyroid glands, which are responsible for regulating body temperature and metabolism, and it has a blue color associated with the sky, the sea, the air. I would add that that the throat is responsible for communication, but I haven't confirmed that with other chakra experts. The third eye, what's referred to often in Eastern thought as the third eye between our eyebrows here, is actually associated back here with the pituitary gland. Well, actually, I think anyway, the pituitary gland is in our brain, and it's often referred to as the master gland. And I'll share more about that in just a few moments, but it exhibits a beautiful indigo blue color. Now, the crown chakra, which is also associated with this third eye, but slightly higher, it actually is the pineal gland. And when it's supercharged, as in meditation, it emits a bright fuchsia color, leading to a dance of the entire rainbow, which to me just makes absolutely sense because when um, the brain waves have jumped from theta to gamma, and I'm going to go into this in a minute. There's this extreme. Um, oh well, let me move on. Anyway, it's associated with spirituality. Those dancing colors are something that when you come out of your meditation, continue into your conscious life, and it's a very interesting experience. So meditation, as many of you know, is a process of actually slowing our thought process down, not fighting it, because if you fight it, you're creating resistance, which we've talked about in the past few days, and resistance is going to stop you. So what you want to do is you want to recognize that you're thinking your thoughts. Don't fight them, just observe them. Okay? If you know the difference between getting wrapped up in your thoughts versus observing them and saying, "Oh, I had a thought," and let it pass. That's where we start. And in fact, that's part of teachings of TM, Transcendental Meditation. And so we slow our thought process and we enliven the centers, and we can do that through breathing, breath work, etc., to recognize a deeper connection with the infinite. So this infinite connection has to do with what I've been talking about today, everything from the flower sermon and more, to science, etc. So, regardless of how you relate to or define infinite intelligence, our God, our goddess, our savior, the divine, or as Michio Kaku calls it, the God equation as a mathematician, there's indisputable forms in the form of energy and light and color that make up our universe. So, how many of you, um, well, let me jump ahead a little bit. I've covered a lot of this. Forgive me, I do take notes here that I have to follow because I get too carried away. And if I get too carried away, we'll go down a road that really may not make sense to a lot of you. So, um, as I mentioned, the current technology right now that is looking at these various types of energy is called the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva. I don't know if any of you have heard about it, but that's where a lot of physicists are playing with these concepts of multiverse, of string theory, and more. But they're primarily doing it mathematically, actually. They're creating mathematical equations that often come out with different solutions. So again, the multiverse. Um, tiny, tiny particles. So really where I want to jump to right now is the brain, and I'm sorry for digressing a few minutes. From that idea of meditation being an excitation of brain waves to the point of gamma, it's also part of brain science. And for those of you who are familiar with Joe Dispenza, he talks about this a lot in his books and also in his YouTube. So if you're not familiar with Joe, go to YouTube and look him up. He has some very interesting interviews as well as guided. Um, and for those of you who stick around with me, I will also share a link to a video that is I find very interesting and fun to watch, and it's only 7 minutes long. I'll share that with you in the email if you'll give me your email address. So we know that the right hemisphere is responsible for creativity and intuition. The left hemisphere controls logic. And in between is a structure of white matter and nerve pathways. And that's called the corpus callosum. And it actually conducts the impulses from your brain, the electrical impulses through the spine and down into the body's vast network of nerves. This is all energy. Then when a cell is stimulated in your body, positive charges enter into that cell, and inside of the cell it becomes more positively charged, which then triggers further electrical currents that turn into pulses called action potentials. I find it amazing how science parallels the whole concept of transcendental thought and more. From these electrical currents are busy running up and down your spine. They're activating certain functions managed by these glands that we mentioned. Again, here we come into the chakra system. These glands that are managed in different areas of your body. And from a biological perspective, the pineal gland recognizes and releases melatonin. Oh, well, the pineal gland actually is the one that helps us fall asleep at night because it recognizes light and dark, and it's responsible for releasing melatonin. Well, for those of you who've ever struggled with falling asleep, you may have tried taking melatonin orally to help you sleep, and it doesn't take a lot. But the pineal gland actually is telling your body to slow down, telling your brain to slow down. And that's what I mean about in meditation, you slow your thoughts down. It's ultimately allowing the mind to let go of thought and slow down into beta brainwaves, which is a sleep brainwave, but we don't go to sleep. Okay, the beta brainwaves are between 13 and 39 cycles a second. And then in meditation, as you allow that thought to slow down, you move into an alpha cycle, which is a little higher. I'm sorry, it's a little slower. It's only 8 to 13 cycles per second. This is why some people have difficulty staying awake when they meditate. When you first get started, it's very common to fall asleep. It's not what we want to do, but it's a biological reaction because we're silencing the brain activity. We're slowing down the brain waves. And then as we go even deeper, we get into theta, which is 4 to 8 cycles. And that actually is what achieves that very tranquil, meditative state of awareness. However, when theta waves are hyper aroused, due to the energy transfer that goes up and down your spine, okay, as we're breathing and we're enlivening those chakras that I just described, things really jump into high gear. And this is where you experience the dancing colors and the sense of true connection. True is kind of a loaded word, but the connection with the universe. And that state of hyper arousal jumps to a consciousness that where there's actually it jumps. So now you're at 40 to 80 cycles a second. So you've gone low into the very low, almost sleep type cycles, and then it goes boom, and you're at 40 to 80 cycles a second. And that creates a biochemical, this is all stuff that Joe Dispenza talks about, this biochemical waterfall that generates an experience that transcends time, moves you into a feeling of bliss, and includes that full of experience of the rainbow of colors, and leaves you with this hyper awareness even when you've come out of the meditation. You're more aware of other, it's an incredible experience. It's almost, well, I haven't done a lot of drugs, so I couldn't say. For those of you who have experienced um, various different types of experiences from that, I can imagine that it's similar to that because you come onto this hyper experience of life and awareness of what's going on around you, almost like you can. It's palpable. It's palpable, I guess, is the way to put it. So again, Joe, just to give you a little background about Joe Dispenza, he studied biochemistry at Rutgers University, well known, and he did a lot of postgraduate training in neuroscience, brain function, and cellular biology. So when you go, if you want the link to this one particular video that pretty much describes, but better than I do, about the function of these uh, frequencies in the brain, I'll give you that link. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. We went from working at connecting with another form of life, a flower, and just seeing how that interaction could possibly be. And again, encouraging you to go outside and really try it with something that's already in nature rather than a picture of it. Try to connect with something natural by going into that dimension that we just got through with meditation. You don't have to do a meditation to experience this, but you can go into a silence and breathe and relax and gaze and let your eyes soften to take in the essence of whatever it is that you're gazing at and see if you can make any kind of a deeper connection with it. And we also talked a little bit about string theory, but more from the perspective of the vibrations at such an incredible level of appearing and disappearing, not knowing whether it's a super high frequency that we simply can't see or whether it's actually going into a different kind of existence. We don't know. We honestly don't know. But we do know that I mean, we actually have seen a particle appear and disappear. So it's kind of interesting. And then we got into going through the color system for emotions, which again, after this call, I encourage you to go ahead and open up that link and take a look at how emotions are connected with different colors. And then we talked about how colors are also connected to our chakra system, our glandular system, how our body functions, and ultimately how our brain science is such that when we meditate, we can experience that full range of color up and down our spine. until it's supercharged. And when that supercharge occurs, we come out of meditation and we have a sense of a much deeper connection with what's going on around us. So I hope that didn't get overly scientific or esoteric for you. Tomorrow, we're going to bring it back down to earth and we're going to just talk about happiness. That's our fifth key. Today's key was vibration and inner authenticity, that when we connect to a vibration, a frequency, an energy, however you want to word that, that is beyond our current understanding, that we enter into a new level of emotion, we enter into a new level of connection, and we also bring up from that subconscious things that we can work on, things that we can evolve, and things that ultimately help us grow further into our self-development and into our ability to really respond authentically from that inner sense so that we gain that inner authenticity in everything we do in life. So, thank you for joining me today. A little bit complicated conversation. I really appreciate you bearing with me. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Great. Okay, we have Lori. You see swirls of yellow and blue and even pink and healing connections. Absolutely. Reiki it really works with these frequencies and these energies by using the different healing centers, the different chakras, the different places on our body to stimulate and heal. So absolutely, yes, I think that's wonderful. Um, I'm going to ask you all, and I'm giving a little hint here. The person who figures it out and puts it in a post in the tribe is going to win something that is in fact I'm going to give you a an ability. Well, okay, I'm going to send you a aromatherapy, a little piece of aromatherapy that helps generate this connection with color. We haven't talked about aromas at all in this. That's something that when I work with you, I ultimately get into. But if you can figure out how the last 4 days and tomorrow have been connected with all of, and I'm not talking about what I've taught or what the keys are, but visually, how have all five ultimately, so you'll have to come tomorrow or look at the replays, how have all five related to each other visually? Now, that's a broad question, and tomorrow I may give you, I don't know, I may give you a little extra hint, but I definitely will give you the answer. So, um, post it. If you notice anything over the last 4 days visually between these different presentations that represents what I've been talking about, and I'll give you a little hint. It's not the Buddha statue, and it's not any of the flowers. It's something else. So I really look forward to seeing you in the tribe. Well, what I'm going to ask is for you to go ahead and invite your friends, get them to join the tribal page on Facebook, access any past videos. Um, what was the question that I asked you? I'm asking you all to go back, look at the past 3 videos that have been posted with regards to this 5-day event. So that would have been Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and today, and see visually what has connected all of them into this conversation. Specifically, here's another hint that we had today. So I'm keeping it vague because if I give too much of a hint, it'll become too obvious. But look at it at just visually without even having to listen to it. You can just look at the different videos and see what connects them to what we've been talking about today. All of them. You don't need to listen to them, although I'd love it if you would. Does that help, Carol? Okay. As I mentioned, please invite your friends, join the tribe, post in it. I'll be there. And you have access to all the past videos up at the top of the tribal page in the featured section. So you can try and answer that. Okay, great. So you can try to answer that question. And don't forget to reach for your blue sky and achieve the lifestyle of your dreams. This is Passion Coach Robin, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me.